Over here, with the Gemara it said, shows that if a person, when you tithe grain, you have 46b towards the bottom. We quoted a Mishnah that if a person takes from inferior produce on quality produce, the halacha is it's a valid tithing. It's valid tithing. However, rabbinically, we penalize the person and we say what you took is truma. However, you have to tithe again from the same produce. That it should be quality on quality, not inferior quality on quality. Right? That's the Mishnah. Hatorim kishos nitza moro. Person tithes kishos gourds and turns out to be bitter. Avtiach v'nipsa saruach. A melon, and it turns to be rotten. Truma. It's considered truma. V'yazu v'yitrum. And we say to the person, you have to tithe again. But the original truma remains truma. So why does the original truma remain truma? So in that Gemara says shani hosum. It's not compared to what we discussed over here. Because on the Torah level, as the Gemara will cite a pasuk, even though you've done the wrong thing, it's considered a valid tithing. Even when you take the inferior on the quality, it's considered a valid tithing. So therefore, it's truma ma'al yehi. Rabbi Loi, how do we know it's valid truma? Although the Torah says you're not permitted. The Omer Rabbi Loi, minayin l'torim min hara la'yofeh. Truma. How do we know when you tithe from the inferior on the quality, it's considered a valid truma? It's considered effective. Shenemar lo sisu olav chet. Ba'arimchem eschelvo. The Torah says, do not allow yourselves to be culpable for the sin when you tithe the chelbo, meaning when you tithe the grain. So the question is, if you say the act is an effective act, the truma is truma, so you've brought about something which the Torah doesn't want. The Torah doesn't want, you should take inferior quality for quality. But if you're saying the act is totally irrelevant, and you have to do it again to be effective, so why is it considered, you're considered a sinner? So evidently, we learn from here, so we learn from here, so we see from the Torah, that when you tithe from even the inferior on the quality, it's considered valid truma. So therefore, before we spoke about a person gives the Kohen flour as challah. There it could be a problem, because there's no such thing. Challah can only be tithed from what? From batter. You have to have dough. But over here, so therefore we say it's gezel b'yad Kohen. The Kohen has to return the flour to the one who had given it to him. But over here, there's no reason to redo it, to say it's nothing, because it is something. It's truma. But rabbinically, since it wasn't done properly, although on a Torah level it's acknowledged and valued, we want you to do it the right way. So the second truma is rabbinical truma. The first truma is truma doraisa. The second act of tithing, the result of the second act, really it's chulin. On a Torah level, it's non-consecrated. But rabbinically, we recognize it as if it is truma. I understand that as a result of that, there's no consequence. No. The reason why it's truma is because the Torah says it's truma. The first. But why don't we say somehow we should treat it, call it tevel? Call it tevel. The reason there's no reason, because again, the consequence of over here, what at worst, what could happen? He may not tithe it again. Let's say he doesn't listen, this person who did it the wrong way. So, is he in violation of Torah law? No, it's a valid tithing. Before, if we don't say give it back, he may, as we said, he may add it to his flour, and he'll create a volume which he's obligated to give challah from. So there you could have, on a Torah level, you could have a catastrophe. No, because the Torah says you could only take challah only from batter, from dough. This is pre-batter. That's the reason. No, it's still edible. If it's not edible, it's not food. It's edible, but it's already, it's not putrid where it's not edible. It's spoiling, where it's bitter. It is edible, so it's still classified as produce.
Yeah. We usually say that Kohanim is using him, and they supposedly they know the halachas, right? Why is this an example of a coin where he just used ignorance?
We'll see. We'll see in a moment. Before we get this. Speak louder. Everybody wants to hear your question.
Is flour and challah interchangeable at this point?
No, they're not interchangeable. They're not. Flour has no relevance to tithing.
All right, so they're not going to mix it up then.
No, but the Kohen not realizing it.
Right, he's going to turn it into a challah.
He'll turn it into batter. And he will believe that he has no obligation to tithe it, but he has an obligation to tithe it on the Torah level. Okay, now, there's a Tosas over here. There's a famous machlokas at the beginning of Tamura between Abai and Rava, when the Torah says you should not do something. And you act and you do despite the Torah says not doing. Your action, is it effective or not effective? It's referred to as Ovid Mahani, Ovid Lo Mahani. If the Torah says do not do it, now the question, if you did it, is it Mahani, is it effective, not effective? It's a machlokas Abai and Rava. Ovid, the Torah says don't do something. For instance, the Torah says, I'll explain to you in a moment. Let's see the Torah says, do not take inferior grain, produce for quality. The Torah says, don't do it. Lo sisul lo v'chet. Now you did do it. Is it a valid tithing? Right? That's the question. I'll give you an example. The Torah says, a Jew is not permitted to marry a non-Jew. He gets two witnesses. He gets the ring, which is a shevet pruta. He says to the non-Jewish woman, Harei mukadeshes li. Right? Is it a valid marriage? It's nothing. Right? Torah says you're not permitted. It's nothing. So in other contexts, Torah says do not marry, a Kohen's not permitted to marry a divorcee. Grusha. Right? So if he does marry the Grusha, is it a marriage? It is a marriage. So that's the Gemara Esed on the other position. The other position, the Torah says, is Iovad Lo Mahani, where Torah says don't do something. Because if the Torah says don't do something, what's the rationale? Here, it's Choti Niskar. The sinner is being rewarded for doing the wrong thing. Same logically, you'd say if Torah says don't do something, and you cross that line, it has no value. But yet we see if a Kohen marries a Grusha, it's a valid marriage. So it disproves this concept that even when you do the wrong thing, you could see it could be effective. This is the back and forth between Abai and Rava. So the answer is, because it says regarding a Kohen marrying a Grusha, it says lo yichal zaro. What happens if a Kohen marries a Grusha? The child is a cholo. Right? The child doesn't have the status of a Kohen. So it seems lo yichal zaro. Zaro mechulo. What is the negative consequence? Only that his child is not a Kohen, but the marriage is a marriage. So the Gemara keeps going back and forth. So, well, that's the exception. Under normal circumstances, it's not effective. Why here? That's the exception. Of course, nothing. No. No, Torah doesn't say in that specific location the child's a mamzer. It's drawn. It's drawn. There's a whole. It's not simple. Here, Torah says specifically, do not marry Grusha because yichalo zaro. It's in the context of not doing the wrong thing, it says what the consequence will be. There, when it says do not marry a sister or this, all the incestual relationship, it doesn't say over there the child will be a mamzer. It does not say that. It just says you're not permitted to marry them. Right? If you do, the liability is kori, so whatever the liability may be. It's drawn from elsewhere that we understand that mamzer is a consequence of that. But it's not within the context where the prohibition is stated. That's the difference.
So in that particular case, it's
not a marriage. Not a marriage whatsoever. Correct. Right? It's like a person marries, God commits adultery. I mean, it's not a marriage. The person marries somebody else's wife. It's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. Right? Okay. So over here, Tosas has a problem. So it's very interesting. So Rabbi Loy says, I just went to Tosas inside because he brings in a number of points. Rabbi Loy says, if the truma is not a valid tithing, so why is he culpable? Why does he have a liability of sinning? So evidently, Rabbi Loy says what? It proves that it is a valid tithing. Because if it's not valid, what did he do wrong? He did nothing wrong. So now Tosas, Lamandi Yomer Hosam, Kol Milsad Omer Achmana Lo Savid. According to the opinion that when the Torah says, do not do something, I Ovid Mahani, but if you do it, you cross the line, it is effective. The Ilo Mahani Loki. It's interesting. What's the argument between the two positions? Yovad Mahani, Yovad Lo Mahani. If you do it, is it effective, not effective? One says, if the Torah says don't do it, it can't be effective. Why can't it be effective? Because then you're benefiting. Torah says you're benefiting from what the Torah says not to do. Therefore, it's not effective. The other one says, you know something, but if it's not effective, so why is he liable for punishment? So evidently, because you did something wrong. You brought about a result which the Torah didn't want. So from there we see it is effective. This is the both sides of the discussion over there. Okay, so Tosas himself says, "Lamad Yomer Hosam," according to the opinion over there in Tamura, "Kol Mils Domer Rachmana Lo Savid." Whenever Torah says, "Do not do that," the Torah says over there it starts off with Tamura. Torah says, and yet if you make Tamura, it says who Tamura see it is. So from there you see Yovad Mahani. Right? That's the discussion. That's part of the discussion. Yovad Mahani, the Lo Mahani, am I Loki? Necho. So according to the position, the Yovad Mahani, Rabbi Loi is very good. Right? Because that's the proof. Why is he considered a sinner if it was ineffective, if it was ineffective? So evidently it was effective. Mike, so he says, my Necho, my Dukamatorim in a rola, Yofet Shumas and Shuma, Dimeino Kodosh. That's exactly the position of the opinion. Yovad Mahani, Avolamadi Bahosim, Yovad Lo Mahani. But according to Machlok Sabai and Rava, but according to the position that it's Lo Mahani, that when Torah says don't do something, we don't want it to be effective. So V'hoda Loki, Mishum de'over amilso the Komer Achmona, because evidently he violated him Ken Kosher. So if that's according to that position, how do we understand our Gemara? My Komer Hocho Gemara. Imenu Kodesh says Chet Lomo. Gemara says, Rabbi Loi says, if in fact the Truma is not valid, so why is he considered a sinner? I'll tell you according to the other position, it's not effective. Nevertheless, he's considered a sinner because he violated what the Torah said he should not do. That itself is the sin itself. Not because you brought about a result. Because the Torah says you're not permitted to do it. It's interesting. The Gemara says in Yuma, Rabbi Akiva was a fierce person. Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, was Okohorim Tochen Zubazu. His level of genius was he was able to uproot mountains and he would grind the mountains. That was the power of his genius. He's fierce, Rabbi Akiva. He went after Malchus, right? 10 martyrs. When they scathed the flesh off his body, he says, I waited all my life for this moment to demonstrate Ma'abas Hashem B'chol Nafshecha. Right? That was Rabbi Akiva. Yet when he would come to a certain pasuk, he would cry. He would cry. He was so moved, he would cry. What was the pasuk? It says that a father annuls the vows of a daughter. Right? It's called hafara. A husband annuls the vows of a wife, and a father annuls the vows of a daughter. So it says that if a woman makes a neder, and a father annuls her vow, it says Hashem yislach lo. God will forgive her. So the Gemara asks, but if the father annulled the vow, what does she need forgiveness? So when she transgressed, it wasn't a transgression. So Rashi cites the Gemara in Yuma, that the Gemara says in Yuma, a person goes to a non-kosher restaurant, Ponderosa Steakhouse, right? And that day, the non-kosher purveyor of the meat wasn't able to deliver, so he went to the glatt kosher butcher. So that day, they served in Ponderosa glatt kosher steaks. But when he was eating that steak, he believed he was eating non-kosher. And he was savoring the non-kosher. Okay? When he thought the vinegar, he thought it was wine vinegar, it was ordinary grain vinegar. He thought it was wine vinegar. He thought the full gamut. When he was eating the crab, it was kosher crab. So it says, kosher hiruri avera be'avera. That contemplating, believing you're sinning is worse than the actual sin itself. Why? Because that's called defiance. I'm going to show God. So it's not what you're eating. So even though it turned out, so what's it speaking about? A woman accepted upon herself to be a nazir. She's not going to drink wine. She's not going to the cemetery. She's not cut her hair. She didn't realize her father overheard her vow, and he annulled it. She went and she drank the wine. She went and she cut her hair and she went to the cemetery. So in her mind, she's violating Hashem Yislach Lo. She has to be forgiven because in her mind she was going against God. That's the concept of I'ovid lo mahani. You deserve to be punished. God says, don't do it. Who do you think you are? Well, I'm going to show you. What do you mean you're going to show me? So even though there's no consequence, there's nesias chet, there's liability. Who do you think you are? You're going to go against the master. You're going to defy him.
What would it be to a crime?
No, because that's what he said. Even though in actuality she did not do the chet, right? You don't have to be culpable for sinning, for eating non-kosher. Even having the mind, that itself, in its own right, is sufficient to be considered a sinner.
Right, but it's a fact. What made him cry about it?
It's like, I'll give you an example. Person went to embezzle money. He opened up the till, put his hand in, found it was empty. Right? And they have it on the camera. All of a sudden they arrest him. They say, what are you arresting me for? Right? You wanted to embezzle money. If there would have been money, you would have taken it. Right? It happened to be, they take out the money, every 24 hours they take the money out of the till. Okay? But where were you at? That's enough to be prosecuted. There's liability for that. It's a little bit different because there no action was done. That's why I said he opened the till. He opened the till. Opening the till is an act of doing an act of
But
embezzlement.
even in that case, if he did it multiple times, then he...
Let's say there was counterfeit money in the drawer. Counterfeit money wasn't the real money. Okay. Okay. It's okay. Well, that's a mishnah. That's a mishnah. That's a mishnah. Mishnah is a person who wants to do a mitzvah and something interferes, not able. He's fully credited for doing the mitzvah, even if he didn't do the mitzvah. No, I'm making the comparison. But it's the same idea. That's I'ovid, even though there's no consequence. But what did you want to do? You ate the steak. You thought it was not kosher. Afterwards, oh, thank God it was kosher. Doesn't make it. You have to do tshuva. You still have to do tshuva. You have to have remorse and you have to make amends with God. Right? That has to be straightened out. Then Rabbi Akiva? No. We'll see. We'll have to answer according to the other opinion. Okay? So, Yesh Lomar. Devari Balmo Lomahani. Under normal circumstances, when the Torah says don't do something, it's not effective. V'hocha mahani, but over here it is effective. Why? Kosuv, klomar. What does it mean? If he transgressed what Torah says you should not do, the Torah says when you tie the various species of produce, what's chelev? Chelev normally means the fat, right? Means it's the cream of the wheat. It's the quality wheat, the quality produce. So from that itself, what's the inference? When you tithe, you should tithe from the quality. So what's the inference from that alone? You should not tithe to something which is not quality. So that should be sufficient. So what does Torah have now? I have to go reiterate. And you should not carry the sin. It's totally superfluous. Because Torah already, the inference already indicated that when you tithe, it has to be a quality tithing. So what does the Torah have to repeat? And you should not carry the sin. It's understood. Chita. The reason why the Torah wrote it, that although under normal circumstances it's not effective, the Torah writes it, lo maloch, that Torah min hara la yofed dikat shnei chatos. There's a double liability here. Firstly, chet she'over amadu kamer rachmano d'yitru min hayof. First, you transgress. Torah says you should tithe quality and not inferior. V'chet al trumoso. And secondly, there's a second liability, because you brought about into reality a truma which is of what? Of inferior quality. Tahavi truma min hara. Find it koma mikan the term min hara ala yofer loshen Rashi. That's how Rashi reconciles this Gemara with the opinion of I'ovid lo mahani. Because the Torah is indicating by writing those extra words that although under normal circumstances ineffective, This is the exception that it is effective. Well, if you learn the Gemara Tamura, multiple cases, each one brings a proof against the others. Well, that's the exception. That's the exception. Definitely, exactly. Without the pasuk, so Rashi's only showing from this pasuk that this pasuk indicates that this is the exception. See, but over here it's even better than the Gemara in Tamura. What Rashi says. See, the Gemara in Tamura says it's the exception. Here, we're saying it's not only the exception. Here, there's a double liability here. Firstly, you did the wrong thing by going against what God wants. In addition, you created an entity which God didn't want you to create the entity. No, it's effective, but again, it's truma, but it's because you created a deficient truma, your liability is even greater. You understand? So it's like it's magnifying the liability. It's not just going against the word of God. You created something which is the God that doesn't want to exist. Similar but not exact. Yeah.
So when we take things like cross-breeding, sharpness, where you can bring into existence something new that results from a piece of it's effective.
No, but that's different. It's different. Torah says, don't cook milk and meat. This has nothing with that argument there. It's a reality of a combination of milk and meat.
It's a reality. Something new is
here it's a chalos. It's an effectiveness. God says, don't wear. You're not permitted to wear wool and linen, where it's actually intermingled. It's a fact. You know, we have a principle. Tosas asks, what's the halacha if I want to consecrate somebody else's animal? You're not able to consecrate somebody else's animal. Why? Or I want because eno demosa dav sheni shalom. You can't change status of someone else's item through your verbal consecration. So yes says, you know, a person has a pot of meat, and I go pour a quart of milk into the pot of meat. It's not going to be possible. You can't affect somebody else's asset negatively. But factually, when you pour that quart of milk into that pot of meat, you have a combination of milk and meat cooking. That's a reality. It's not an effect. There, the status is based on the reality of what it is. Here, let's say we speak about Tmura. You say, this animal, I want to transfer kiddushin from one animal to the other. That's a halacha. That's not a reality. It's only a reality if Torah allows it to be. It's not a physical reality. It's an effectiveness. To be effective, only if Torah says it could be effective. It's like we said, you want to marry a non-Jew. It's not a marriage. A non-Jew is not a marriage to a Jew. Even though you may mimic everything to be identical to what a Jewish marriage is, it's not a marriage. It's meaningless.
because a man crossbreeds two animals that are not supposed to be crossbred. Now this female animal bears a calf.
And it's
Is it a before? What is it?
no. Firstly, it's not valid for a chorzon. No, it's not. Well, that's a separate question. It's separate.
So how do these things
No.
How does this effectiveness concept work?
You know, it's interesting. The Mishnah in Avodah Zarah. We're not discussing Sukkah or Megillah today because Richie's here. Okay, the Mishnah says in Avodah Zarah, it says that one of the Roman emperor says to one of the Tanoim, he says, if God is the master of the universe, so why, when a man commits adultery, impregnates somebody else's wife, what is he allowed? There should be conception. Creating an illegitimate child. Shouldn't happen. And he says, the pagans worship the sun. If God is the only power, he shouldn't allow it. Right? So he says, what, you want God to destroy the world? Man does what he wants. Ultimately, man is culpable, liable for his behavior. God is not going to destroy the world and alter nature because of man's misbehavior. A man wants to impregnate a married woman, it's adultery. The child, there's going to be conception. Because a male cohabitating with a woman, a consequence of that is what is conception. That's it. God's not altering nature because man's misbehavior. God's not going to destroy the sun because they're sun worshippers. That's the way it is. Oh, but does Noach have something else? No, it's different. It's different. No. First, God said He's not going to destroy the world again. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the difference between effective and non-effective. This inferior truma that we take is the question: does this have the status of truma?
So only because of the pasuk, he's showing from the pasuk it does.
That's what we're talking about effective.
But what is this effect? If you want to tithe somebody else's grain, is it effective? Your active tithing? No. Right? You have to own the grain. If you don't own the grain, you cannot tithe somebody else's grain unless you made into it. We had a shliach. If you're designated as an agent, then you could tithe somebody else's grain because you are that person.
You can't say that this man would have been happy.
But then it will come into schiyah because doing something which is beneficial, then you're the equivalent of an agent. Right? Right. That's what it'll be. That's zochel, which is the question. It may work, but for other reasons it doesn't work. For other reasons it doesn't work. Because that zochel may odom. When you want to do something which is beneficial to me, that's when you're bringing something to me. When you want to bring about a result which is detrimental, it's a detriment also. Of course, it's costing me. There, I'm actually relinquishing, as a result of you doing on my behalf, I have less than I had before. Normally, schiyah, when I do something which is beneficial, I'm bringing something to the person. Not where there's a cost factor to the person who I'm doing something beneficial to. It's a separate discussion. Okay. Omar Rovo. Ready to go a little further. Omar Rovo. Now, we had earlier, if a person marries a woman, so we know marriage has to be minimally a sheva pruta, has to be worth minimally a cent. And he wants to marry her with 3 dates. Okay? And he says, I want to marry you bizu, bizu, bizu. With A, B, and C. So the Mishnah says that if all the dates in combination, combined, are worth a sheva pruta, she's mukudeshes. She's mukudeshes. What about as he gives her the dates? He gives her date A, she eats it. Date B, she eats. And date C, she eats it. So the Gemara says, so there's a machlokes, Rav and Shmuel and Ravami had to understand the Mishnah. So it says that if one of the dates was a sheva pruta, she's mukudeshes. She's mukudeshes. So the Gemara says, Rav and Shmuel says, what's the kiddushin Mishnah? It's understood. It's understood. So he said it's going on the ratio. Ravami says it's going on the conclusion, meaning that since the intent of the man who gave the woman the date for marriage, he did not want her to have it as marriage until he gave her all 3 dates. So she ate the first date. What did she eat? She ate his date. So when he finally gives her the 3rd date, now what is he marrying her? With the date which she ate. That's a milveh. Meaning the money that she owes him for the date that she ate, now that will contribute to the marriage. It's a problem. Right? Because Mekadosh Milvahs Ein Mukadeshes. You can't marry a woman with what? With money that's relieving a person from a debt. That's not a valid marriage. So he says, so Ravami says, when it says in the Mishnah, it's a Sheva Pruta, means the last date. If the last date that he had given her was a Sheva Pruta, then she's Mukadeshes. The other two, it's a debt. He's relieving her the debt. Relieving her the debt. Right? So over there, what are we speaking about? So we explained that Ravami holds that most choser, according to Ravami, right? We explained that when a man gives a woman anything in marriage, we made a differentiation. Person gives a woman $100, and he says, "Harei mukadeshes with $100," that the marriage should take effect in 30 days from now. The Gemara says later in the parak, she's mukadeshes. Why? Because he did a full act of marriage to be effective in 30 days. But over here, the act of marriage hasn't been completed. It's only the 3 dates in combination will bring about the act of marriage. So when does he want the giving to be assumed the status of an act of marriage when the third date is given. When he gives the third date, what was the first date? When she ate the first date, it wasn't an act of marriage yet. Therefore, we classify it as milveh. You ate his date. What about initially he says to her like this, I'm going to marry you with all 3 dates. With these dates, I'm marrying you. So he's already stated his case that even when he gave the first date, it's been given as marriage. So the first date is like giving her all the full amount of money to be effective in 30 days. Wait, no, that's what he's saying. Rob is saying the Mishnah that we say that if she eats the dates, the last date has to be a shavet pruta, because otherwise the milva, that's only where he didn't say initially what he's marrying her with. He's doling it out, and only bizu, 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 this, that, and that. Then in retrospect, I see what his intention was. But if initially he starts, he says, I'm marrying you with these 3 coins, with these 3 dates. And now he starts giving you the dates. So he already stated clearly the first date is for marriage. The second date is for marriage. So when she ate the date, what did she eat? She ate something that was given for marriage. It wasn't to be seen. It wasn't at the end, then it becomes for marriage. Well, if he didn't give it a third, then it's nothing. Right? Because he said, all 3 in front of her. All 3. He says, these 3 dates, but he has to give it to her. And he starts transferring it. 1, 2, 3.
But if that's the case, why is the last one have to be shavet pruta?
Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. In total, it has to be worth a pruta. Because we see it all as one entity. No, he says, be'elu, with these. And then he gives it one after another. No. If he said that, no, that's not the case. It's not the case. That's not the case. And he's still talking with this, and with that. But she doesn't know until he finishes speaking, she doesn't know what she's getting. Doesn't make a difference. But the question is, what's in his mind? What does he consider the first date he gave her? Does he consider it as an act of marriage, or only after he's given all 3, then it becomes an act of marriage?
So he's saying the way that this is unfolding, he says bazu, then she eats it. Before she hears the second bazu.
Exactly.
So she's eating fast. So bazu, she eats. Then he says bazu, she eats again. Before she's heard the third one.
Right? Correct.
Therefore, that's the case.
Yeah. Correct. Or she could assume whatever she wants. Let's say she sees all 3 dates, and she's assuming he's going to give her all 3. But the question is, what's in his mind? If he didn't state that he's giving all 3 in marriage, that means until he gives the third, only then I've given all 3 in marriage. So, but if you've eaten the first, by the time I get to the third, that means even if I'm marrying you with the first one, but it's a milva now, I'm marrying you with what you owe me. But that's not valid, because you have to give something in marriage at the time when you give it as marriage.
So in this particular case, when do we understand when to say harei at
Hare at mukadeshes li bezu. He introduces it. That's it.
harei at mukadeshes
Bezu, bezu, u bezu.
And so bazu, she eats one, bazu, she eats another, and now he says the third.
Third
That's
one.
the way this is working.
Exactly. But let's see, it says hare at mukadeshes li be'elu, with these. And then same thing happens. It's not a problem. Even though each one is a fraction of a cent, but in combination it's a cent, she's married. No, because the first act was part of, he already gave it as the act of kiddushin. To be continued.
Oh, thank you.